And welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you. Thanks for checking out the channel. Hope everybody's doing fantastic out there in Heatland. Probably not that great this morning as you wake up and your Miami Heat licking their wounds after an ugly affair in Toronto. Couldn't stop nobody. Nobody but Tyler Herro really was in an offensive groove. Maybe Terry Rozier a little bit. Jimmy Butler's banged up. Bam Adebayo can't hit the broadside of a barn. He's rebounding, though, I guess, 20 rebounds. Yay. This was supposed to be the leap. This is what we looked for. But Miami's got a big one tonight, obviously, against the Boston Celtics, and really a big week ahead. Boston is coming off of a rare loss. They lost last night to the Cleveland Cavaliers, so they're also coming in second night of a back-to-back. They are traveling, so there's really no travel excuse for Miami or getting a fresh Boston team because they were in a hard-fought game. They lost to Cleveland, who, of course, was getting revenge for Boston handing them their first loss of the season. And, this is one of those weeks, not just games, where I think it's going to say I'm hopeful that there's going to be some answers by the end of this, but I feel like ultimately it's going to end up probably the same. I would like to come out of this week with games against Boston, the Lakers, the Suns, and Cleveland, 3 of those at home. And I would like to have some semblance of knowing what this Miami Heat team really could be. A measuring stick week, if you will, where Miami can go up against the best powers that you pretty much could throw at them in this NBA on a consistent basis. So it's not a playoff series. There's a couple of back-to-backs. There's going to be some adversity. Definitely not a week I expect to sweep. But I feel like Miami could really show management, the fan base, something if they somehow could have a 3-1 week. Now, how likely is that? Not bloody likely, probably. It's probably, at best, looking at a 2-2 week based on how this team has played. Though Miami has been very, very competitive, they really have not had a lot of games where they have been waxed. You could probably count to the opening night against Orlando. New York gave it to them pretty good in the second half. And Denver as the 3 losses where Miami, probably had no business winning the game. Spo had this statement yesterday about being worthy to win the game. He had a new Spoism came out, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. But for the most part, their last 3 losses, you have a 3-point loss to Toronto, a 3-point loss to Milwaukee. The Indy game got away with them a little bit, but that had a little bit of window dressing on it too. They almost made a comeback there, and then of course we know the Spo spectacular, the Suns, the Kings game was on a putback. The Suns game was very close. So for the most part, Miami has been in all these games. So I don't think there's going to be many games where Miami is going to get just run off the floor. I think they'll play pretty competitive. But ultimately, you need to start racking up some wins. And Miami is still just teetering at this 500 place. Orlando has been, playing pretty damn well. And this is in a run where they have not had their best player for a very, very long time. He is dealing with a very serious injury, and yet they sit here, 15-7 on the season. Their roster just is well put together, and they just look like a young team that's ready to just thump anybody that comes in there. And we'll get another look at Orlando, but that was pretty indicative of what we saw the last time Miami played Orlando. So they're not playing Orlando this week. The other thing that's going to be an interesting mix, as much as I want this to be a measuring stick week, I don't know if they're going to have Jimmy Butler. I don't know if Jimmy Butler is going to be able to go tonight for the Miami Heat. It was not a clear post game from him. They wouldn't say if he didn't know if he was going to get an MRI. As I record this, I'm sure we'll get some injury update during the day. My lean is he probably wouldn't go. Certainly if this was last year, I don't think Jimmy would have go. You could definitely see there's more of an effort for Butler to get out there no matter what. And there's been nights where you can see if Butler doesn't have the juice in the legs, he just doesn't look like he's got the same impact. But look, there is also an element to Jimmy. He hates Boston. This is not just a This is not just a case of, oh, if it was another game, sure, I think he'd miss it. But that dude obviously wrote some big checks when he wasn't playing. That was the whole element of Pat Riley saying, keep your mouth shut if you're not on the court to determine the results. We're going to go up 2-1. And then, of course, in the starting five, basically just went out there and said, F Boston. Stop asking me about Boston. F Boston is what he said with, the actual word. So I do think there's also an element that Jimmy wants to get out there because it is Boston. We remember the last time where Jimmy flew in, he was hurt and then flew into Boston and then won a game. He hates that team, and I think he would love the opportunity, but it is one of these things where I don't know what the fallout of that is if he does go and give it a go on this banged up knee. We'll see. It was definitely tough to look at that yesterday, to see him labor through that. And he really wasn't able to finish the game. Remind you, the game a couple of games back, the Charlotte game, he couldn't finish the game. He basically couldn't play the fourth quarter because his back had tightened up on him, and he's laboring through some things. So that is, that does put a little bit of a wrinkle into my measuring stick week if you don't have Jimmy Butler, because Jimmy Butler is a huge part of this team. And then you have also on the elements of like, hey, can these three together, him, Bam, and Tyler, are they going to be cohesive together? Can they all be productive at the same time? Can that work? That's another thing that you really would love to figure out by the end of this 4-game stretch, Monday to Sunday, against these teams that you're taking on. They also, if Jimmy doesn't go, man, they got to get a lot more from Bam. So many games you're seeing 6 of 16s and 5 for 13s, 5 for 14s, 5 for 15s, 4 for 12s. The guy has to get his shot going. And this is an interesting one because Boston has the Heat's playoff success against Boston has not really involved Tyler Herro outside of his rookie year. And he's pretty clearly been their best player this year. They've done a good job. They got Drew Holiday to throw at him tonight. So that's another interesting thing to check with this matchup tonight is Tyler versus Drew. How effective will that be? And then, the other thing is you want to know whether or not Miami is going to take – they've been better at home this year for sure. This has not been, the disappointment. But since they've come back, they've won 3 out of their last 4 home games, with the loss being to Milwaukee, which was definitely a disappointing loss. But, can they use any of this home court advantage against the Lakers, against Phoenix, against Cleveland? The other thing that you have to look out for tonight will be the size thing, because Kevin Love is on a back-to-back. He did not look physically great yesterday. And remember, that was a playoff series. Man, he really could not give the Heat anything in that series against Boston. It was one of those where, all right, Haywood can have his moments against Jason Tatum, so I'm sure that he'll add some elements of being helpful in that. And then Kel'el's going to be an interesting one tonight too. Like, will Spo throw him into the fire? He's kind of, he's protected him at times against some of these big time matchups, and I would like to see him kind of throw Kel'el to the fire, and let's see what the kid can do. Nico is not on the trip. I don't know if he's traveling to Boston, but he did not travel because he hurt his ankle. So I'd imagine they're just going to keep him home. I don't think he's going to fly in to not play. So, that becomes a whole nother thing too, is, what's become of Niko Jovic? Does this just like pull the plug on the season for him? Is there going to be another moment for him? I don't know. Jaime did look pretty good and had his moments before he got hurt in that Boston series. So you can look to that as well and see what's going on. And then, of course, you have the Scary Terry Revenge Tour that gets going into that. But then, out of the outset of it, even if they, health is going to dictate a lot of it because of where Jimmy's at. But if they get waxed this week, does that make the Heat make some decisions? Even if Jimmy's not healthy, that I think kind of plays into it. If they go 2-2 with Jimmy in there, does that give them a little bit more hope to punt? If they go 3-1, does that give them even more belief? All all of that stuff's going to be interesting. And I can't imagine that Pat Riley and the Miami Heat are not looking at this and really taking a big evaluation. Because you are starting to get these reports out there, right? Chicago, everybody's available. The Pelicans, new Brandon Ingram news. He's with Clutch. He's left his management. He's ready to move on. I don't think the Heat make a move on Brandon Ingram just because he wants so much damn money. I would be surprised by that. But all these teams, the Nets, all these teams that are already, packing it in, they're already making their plans to make moves. And you have to think that the Heat are looking around and do they think to themselves, all right, well, we have a lottery protected pick that's owed to OKC. Are they just as competitive as they try and hope that there's a whale in the summer and that's the place that they go because, Milwaukee's kind of righted the ship, so that doesn't look like they'll be able to pick the bones there. So then, what legitimately is the move out there, right? We probably came into this and you're like, well, if the Heat are going to make an in-season move, there's going to be a whale. That's me, actually. That's my move. If there's going to be a whale, it's going to be the Bucks. It's going to be the Suns. And both of those teams, obviously the West is very, very competitive right now, but the Suns have had a nice season. The Bucks are okay. I did notice though. I don't know when they're gonna pull the plug on this, but Anthony Edwards calling out his fan base. Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm getting ahead of myself. De'Aaron Fox too. So maybe that's the attention. The attention now goes to Minnesota and Sacramento right now. If you're circling like a buzzard around those teams, but for Miami right now. I think I would love them to come out of this week with some clarity, right? And my biggest fear is that they get smashed like a bug this week. But I don't think that they will. I haven't seen Miami look not competitive in a game in a while. But my biggest fear is that they're going to come out of this week and it's just going to be murkier because you're going to be past the 20-game threshold, right? You'll be at 22 games by then. And odds are they'll probably just be 11-11, and all right, we'll figure it out at 30 games. So it'll definitely be an interesting thing. But God, the Butler health thing is definitely something to keep an eye on. How Tyler plays against Boston is going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on, and just this entire week because he's just been their biggest power source for offense. And then Bam, man. It's great that he's doing everything but scoring, but God, they got to have an efficient scoring game from him. They have to. And I know it can kind of get lost in the sauce for him of, I got to set up all these people. Dude, enough of this stuff already. This is you have been beating up the rim with that basketball this year. It has been, it's rough. It's rough. They're bandaging it up. What's wrong with that rim? Bam night. So hopefully he gets into a run where he gets into a comfort zone and feels that he can get on a run because it's been, that shooting percentage is ugly. But with the Heat, you want to see them, get in a little bit of a run because right now they have, 9 wins. They're 9-9, which is 500. But mind you, they have this weird thing where they're oddly 3 games behind the pace of everybody in the league because I don't know how that happened. Very strange. But yeah, that's the same amount of wins as the Pistons, the Nets, and Indy. While they have more losses, it's the same amount of wins. And one more win than the Chicago Bulls. And these are all teams that are talking about. So yeah, you do need to see Miami get some semblance of, all right, we're this good. Let's go forward with it. This is the night they start hopefully getting answers on that, and then can come to a real conclusion by Sunday.